The candles on my birthday cake flickered, casting a warm, dancing glow across Sarah's beaming face. 45. Another year circled on the calendar, and here I was, surrounded by what I thought was my loving family, the familiar scent of Mom's pot roast filling the air. Sarah, my younger sister by 5 years, leaned in, her blonde hair catching the light. "Make a good wish, Marky," she said, using the nickname only she dared to call me. I smiled, a genuine one, I thought. It was nice having them all hear Mom, still navigating the quiet emptiness of the house since Dad passed last year. And Sarah, always so vibrant, so full of life. I closed my eyes for a moment, the usual wish forming in my mind. Good health for Mom, continued success in my somewhat monotonous but stable IT job, and maybe, just maybe, a little less responsibility. I'd always been the dependable one, the steady ship in our family's often choppy waters. When Dad was sick, I was the one who took him to appointments, who handled the finances. Now that he was gone, that role seemed to have naturally transferred to Mom and, well, to Sarah in a different way. Sarah. She was a whirlwind, charming, beautiful, but perpetually in a bind. Over the years, I'd helped her out countless times. A flat tire, a late rent payment, a sudden business opportunity that always seemed to fall through. Each time, she'd been so grateful, so full of promises to pay me back, though those promises rarely materialized. I never pushed it. She was my sister, after all. Family helped family. That's what Dad always said. Tonight, though, felt different. Sarah was unusually effusive. "This pot roast is amazing, Mom. You outdid yourself," she exclaimed, taking another generous helping. "And Marky, this cake is perfect. You always know how to pick the best ones." She'd even gotten me a new gadget, a fancy smartwatch I'd been eyeing but hadn't wanted to splurge on. "You deserve it, big brother," she'd said with a hug that lingered a little too long, maybe. As the evening progressed, Sarah recounted a recent trip she'd taken with friends, laughing animatedly as she described some hilarious mishap. Mom chuckled along, her eyes crinkling at the corners, a sight that always warmed my heart. I listened, nodding, but a small seed of unease began to sprout in my mind. The trip sounded expensive. Sarah had mentioned something about needing a new set of tires for her car just last month. A bill I'd quietly taken care of. How could she afford a trip like that? "Oh, Marky," Sarah said suddenly, interrupting her story, her tone shifting to a more serious note. "Remember how I was telling you about that online course I wanted to take? The one in digital marketing?" "Yeah," I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. "Well," she continued, her eyes wide and earnest, "it's starting next week, and there's a small issue with the tuition. It's a bit more than I anticipated, and with everything else." She trailed off, giving me that look, or the one that had always melted away any hesitation I might have had. My internal alarm bells started to chime, albeit softly. This felt familiar, too familiar. But then I looked at her hopeful face, at Mom's gentle smile, and I pushed the thought away. Maybe I was being cynical. Maybe she really was trying to get her life on track. "How much is it?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. It's around $1,500, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. $1,500. That was a significant chunk of change. I'd been saving up for a new laptop. Mine was practically ancient, but Sarah was my sister, and this was for her future, right? "Okay," I said, perhaps a little too quickly. "We can figure something out. Let's talk about it later this week." Sarah's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Oh, Marky, you're the best. I don't know what I'd do without you." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her touch surprisingly firm. As the evening drew to a close and Sarah helped Mom clear the dishes, I found myself staring at the half-eaten slice of cake on my plate. $1,500. For a digital marketing course. It sounded promising, I told myself. It would finally give Sarah the skills she needed to become independent. But as I watched her laugh with Mom in the kitchen, a nagging feeling persisted. It was a subtle prickle of doubt, a whisper in the back of my mind that I couldn't quite ignore. Something about the timing, about the almost rehearsed way she'd brought up the course, felt off. I shook my head slightly, trying to dislodge the thought. It was my birthday. I should be happy, surrounded by family. I was probably just tired, the weight of another year settling on my shoulders. But deep down, a tiny seed of suspicion had been planted, and I had a feeling it was about to start growing roots. A few days later, the digital marketing course seemed to have been forgotten. Sarah hadn't mentioned it again, which, in hindsight, should have been my first real clue. Instead, she called me on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice tight with panic. "Marky, I need your help," she stammered, and my heart immediately clenched. That tone always meant trouble. "What is it, Sarah? What's wrong?" I asked, my fingers instinctively tightening around my phone. It's serious," she said, her voice cracking. "I went to the doctor today, and they found something. They think it might be serious." My blood ran cold. Mom had been through so much with Dad's illness. The thought of Sarah facing something similar sent a wave of fear through me. "What is it? What did they say?" "They need to do more tests," she said, her voice trembling. "But the doctor said I might need surgery soon, and my insurance won't cover all of it." Not even close. My mind raced. Surgery? For Sarah? She was always so healthy, so vibrant. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a heavy, drawn-out silence that felt like an eternity. Finally, she spoke, her voice thick with what sounded like tears. They said it could be upwards of $5,000. "I don't have that kind of money, Marky. You know I don't." $5,000. That was a huge sum. My savings weren't exactly overflowing. The new laptop would have to wait indefinitely, and probably a few other things too. But what was a laptop compared to my sister's health? "Don't worry, Sarah," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We'll figure it out. I'll help you. You just focus on getting better." Relief flooded her voice. "Oh, Marky, thank you. Thank you so much. I knew I could count on you." She sniffled. "I don't know what I would do without you." Over the next few days, I transferred the money to her account, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach with each transaction. I didn't ask for details about the diagnosis or the doctor. I trusted her. She was my sister. A couple of weeks later, I went to visit Mom. The house still felt strangely quiet without Dad, but Mom was slowly finding her rhythm. We were sitting in the living room, sipping tea and looking through old photo albums, when my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sarah. "Hey, just landed. Beach is amazing. Wish you were here." Winking face. I frowned, confusion clouding my thoughts. Beach? Sarah hadn't mentioned going anywhere. Maybe she was on a short weekend trip with a friend? But the winking emoji felt odd, considering the serious health scare just weeks ago. "Everything all right, dear?" Mom asked, noticing my puzzled expression. "Yeah, Mom, just a text from Sarah," I said, trying to sound casual. "She mentioned something about a beach trip." Mom's eyebrows furrowed slightly. "A beach trip?" I thought she was, not feeling well. A cold tendril of suspicion snaked its way around my heart. I tried to shake it off. Maybe she needed a break after the stress of the doctor's visits. Maybe the surgery had been less serious than initially thought. The following Saturday, I decided to stop by Mom's again. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Sarah's car was parked out front. That was unusual. She hadn't mentioned visiting Mom. I walked up to the front door and let myself in. "Mom? Sarah?" I called out. "In here, honey," Mom replied from the kitchen. I walked into the kitchen and saw Mom sitting at the table, sipping tea. Sarah was there too, her back to me, talking on her cell phone. She was laughing, a light, carefree sound that jarred with the memory of her tearful calls just weeks ago. As I got closer, I heard snippets of her conversation. "And he totally fell for it. $5,000. Can you believe it? He's such a sucker." She giggled. "Yeah. The Maldives are amazing. The water is so blue, and the resort is incredible. Totally worth it." My steps faltered. My breath caught in my throat. The blood drained from my face. I felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. Sarah turned around, her smile instantly vanishing when she saw me standing there. Her eyes widened in panic. The phone slipped from her grasp and clattered onto the tiled floor. The laughter died in the air, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. I stared at her, my mind reeling, trying to reconcile the image of my distraught sister begging for money for a serious surgery with the carefree woman bragging about her luxurious vacation. "Marky," she began, her voice a thin, shaky whisper, but I couldn't speak. The reality of her betrayal hit me like a physical blow. The $5,000, the tears, the fear in her voice. It had all been a lie, a carefully constructed manipulation to extract money from me. My hands started to tremble, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden hollowness I felt inside. Years of helping her, of believing her, of putting her needs before my own. It all flashed before my eyes, and in that moment, the cozy image of my loving family shattered into a million pieces. The pain was sharp, visceral, a deep ache of betrayal that cut me to the core. I just stood there, numb, staring at my sister, the woman I had always trusted, the woman who had just so casually ripped my heart out. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Mom looked from me to Sarah, her face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. Sarah's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, for some way to explain away the undeniable truth. "Marky, it's not what it looks like," she finally stammered, her voice trembling. But the words sounded hollow, even to her own ears I could tell. "Not what it looks like?" I repeated, my voice low and dangerously calm. It was a voice I hadn't used in years, the one that surfaced only when I was pushed beyond my limit. "Sarah, I just heard you. You were bragging about how you conned me out of $5,000 for a vacation in the Maldives. You lied about needing surgery. You lied to me, to Mom." I gestured towards our mother, whose face was now pale and etched with distress. Sarah's facade crumbled. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time, they didn't look genuine. They felt manipulative, calculated. "Okay, fine," she said, her voice rising defensively. "So I went on a trip. So what? I deserved it. I've been stressed out." "Stressed out?" I scoffed, the anger finally starting to bubble to the surface, replacing the initial shock. "Stressed out from what, Sarah? From constantly asking me for money? From living a life you can't afford? Knowing I'll always bail you out? Don't act like you're so perfect, Marky," she shot back, her voice laced with resentment. "You always act like you're better than me. You always judge me." "I've never judged you, Sarah," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I've helped you, time and time again. I've believed your stories, even when they sounded far-fetched. I've sacrificed my own wants and needs to make sure you were okay. And this is how you repay me? With a blatant lie and a trip to the Maldives." Mom finally found her voice, her tone laced with disappointment. "Sarah, is this true? Did you really lie to Mark about needing surgery?" Sarah avoided Mom's gaze, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Mom, it's complicated." "Complicated," I interjected, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "There's nothing complicated about it, Mom. Sarah needed money for a vacation, so she made up a story about a serious illness to get it from me. That's not complicated, that's called fraud." "Oh, come on, Marky. Don't be so dramatic," Sarah said, rolling her eyes. "It's not like you needed the money. You're always so careful with your finances." That comment hit me like a slap in the face. So, because I was responsible, because I worked hard and saved, it was okay for her to take advantage of me? Because she assumed I wouldn't miss it? "That's it, Sarah," I said, my voice firm, all traces of doubt and hesitation gone. The anger had solidified into a cold, hard resolve. "I'm done. I'm done being your personal ATM. I'm done enabling your irresponsible lifestyle. The free ride is over." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about this," I said, pulling out my phone. I opened my banking app and started scrolling through the recent transactions. "The $1,500 for your digital marketing course?" Gone. The $5,000 for your surgery? Gone. Every single penny I've given you over the past year? I'm gonna add it all up, Sarah, and you know what? I'm not expecting a single cent back. You can't do that, she shrieked, her face contorted with fury. I need that money. No, Sarah, you want that money? I corrected her calmly. There's a big difference between needing and wanting, and I've finally realized that your wants have been consistently prioritized over my needs for far too long. But I wasn't finished. There was one more thing, something that had been simmering in the back of my mind for years. Dad had left us a small cabin up north, a place filled with childhood memories. We co-owned it, but Sarah had always treated it like her own personal getaway, often inviting friends up without even asking me. She'd always talked about retiring there someday. And there's something else, Sarah, I continued, my gaze unwavering. I've been thinking about the cabin. It's just sitting there, mostly unused. I've decided I'm going to sell it. Sarah's face went white. You can't. That's not fair. Dad wanted us to keep it in the family. Dad also wanted us to be honest with each other. I countered, my voice laced with a sadness that surprised even myself. And you haven't been honest with me for a very long time. I need the money, Sarah, for my own future, for things I've put on hold because I've been too busy taking care of you. The air crackled with unspoken words, with years of resentment and unspoken grievances finally brought to the surface. Sarah stared at me, her mouth agape, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Mom sat at the table, her hand covering her mouth, tears silently streaming down her face. In that moment, standing in the familiar kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of my birthday dinner, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was anger, yes, and a deep sense of hurt, but there was also a sense of liberation, a feeling of finally breaking free from a cycle that had been draining me for years. I had made my decision. The free ride was over, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in control of my own life. The immediate aftermath was exactly as I'd expected. A barrage of angry calls and desperate texts from Sarah. She accused me of being heartless, of ruining her life, of going against Dad's wishes regarding the cabin. She even tried to play the victim, claiming she was now in serious financial trouble and it was all my fault. I mostly ignored them, only responding with short, firm messages reiterating my decision. Then came the calls from other family members. My Aunt Carol, always the family gossip, called to express her concern for Sarah, subtly implying I was being too harsh. My cousin Michael, who had borrowed money from me a few times himself and never fully repaid, sent a lengthy text about the importance of families sticking together, conveniently forgetting his own past transgressions. It felt like everyone was taking Sarah's side, painting me as the villain who had suddenly turned cold and unfeeling. Initially, their reactions did sting. A wave of guilt washed over me. Had I been too abrupt? Too unforgiving? Maybe Sarah was just going through a rough patch. Maybe I should have tried to talk to her more, to understand her situation better. The years of being the dependable one, the fixer, made it hard to suddenly step back and let someone else deal with their own problems. I found myself replaying the scene in Mom's kitchen over and over in my head, the hurt and betrayal still raw. But then I'd remember Sarah's callous laughter on the phone, her blatant disregard for my feelings and my generosity, and the guilt would slowly give way to a sense of righteous anger. I had been taken advantage of, manipulated, and lied to. I deserved better. Mom, bless her heart, was caught in the middle. She called me, her voice filled with sadness. She didn't condone Sarah's actions, but she worried about her. She's your sister, Mark, she'd said softly. Try to be understanding. I explained my side of the story again, emphasizing the years of financial support and the blatant lie about the surgery. Mom listened quietly, and while I could tell she was still concerned about Sarah, she didn't push me. I think, deep down, she knew that Sarah had crossed a line. The silence from Sarah eventually became deafening. The angry calls and texts stopped, replaced by an eerie quiet. I wondered if she had finally accepted my decision or if she was simply plotting her next move. Part of me braced for another attempt at manipulation, another tearful plea. But for the time being, there was only silence. In the quiet that followed, I started to reflect on my relationship with Sarah, on my role in the family dynamic. I realized that I had, in many ways, enabled her behavior. My willingness to always step in and help had prevented her from taking responsibility for her own life. I had become her safety net, her fallback plan, and she had grown to expect it. The sale of the cabin moved forward. It was a bittersweet process, filled with memories of Dad and our childhood summers. But as the paperwork was finalized and the money landed in my account, a sense of relief washed over me. It felt like I was finally untangling myself from a web of obligation and expectation. With the extra money, I didn't immediately buy that new laptop. Instead, I opened a separate savings account, one dedicated to my own future, my own goals. It felt empowering, like I was finally investing in myself. The initial loneliness I had felt started to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of self-worth. I started spending more time with friends, pursuing hobbies I had neglected, and focusing on my own well-being. I realized that my life didn't have to revolve around constantly fixing Sarah's problems. I was allowed to have my own life, my own dreams. The betrayal had been painful, but it had also been a catalyst. It had forced me to confront the unhealthy dynamic I had with my sister and to finally prioritize myself. I was learning that setting boundaries, even with family, wasn't selfish. It was necessary for my own emotional and financial health. The silence from Sarah still lingered, but now it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like space. Space for me to breathe, to heal, and to finally build a life on my own terms. The dependable brother was finally learning to depend on himself. Life after cutting off the financial lifeline to Sarah wasn't a fairy tale, but it was undeniably better. The constant low-level anxiety that had been a background hum in my life for years started to fade. I slept better, knowing my hard-earned money was going towards my own future, not funding someone else's impulsive decisions. The silence from Sarah continued for several months. Then, out of the blue, I received a generic birthday card in the mail. It was signed by her, with a brief, almost perfunctory "Hope you're well." There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened. It felt like a ghost from a past I was trying to leave behind. I tossed it in the recycling bin without a second thought. Mom and I continued to have our regular visits. She never explicitly brought up Sarah, but I could sense a lingering sadness in her eyes. I made an effort to focus on our time together, sharing stories about work and my rekindled interest in photography. We even started a new tradition of going out for brunch every Sunday, something Dad hadn't been keen on. These small changes brought a quiet joy to both of us. The sale of the cabin had provided a significant financial boost. After putting a portion into savings, I finally bought that new laptop. It might seem like a small thing, but it felt like a tangible symbol of my newfound freedom. I also booked a solo trip to the Grand Canyon, something I'd always dreamed of doing but had put off due to financial constraints and family obligations. Standing at the rim, gazing at the vast expanse, I felt a profound sense of peace and independence. One evening, I received a call from Mom. Her voice was hesitant. "Mark," she said. "Sarah? She's asked for your number." My first instinct was to say no, to shut that door firmly. But then I paused. I had wanted Sarah to take responsibility for her actions, and perhaps this was a sign that she was finally ready to face the consequences. "Give it to her, Mom," I said. A few days later, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello, Mark? It's Sarah." Her voice was subdued, lacking its usual vibrancy. We talked for a while. It wasn't easy. There were awkward silences and a lot of unspoken tension. She didn't offer a direct apology, but she did acknowledge that she had made mistakes. She mentioned struggling financially and having to downsize her apartment. There was a hint of regret in her voice, though it was hard to decipher if it was for her actions or for the consequences she was now facing. I listened more than I spoke. I wasn't ready to forgive her completely, and I wasn't going to offer any more financial help. But I also didn't want to be completely closed off to the possibility of a different kind of relationship in the future, one based on honesty and mutual respect. "Sarah," I said finally, "things are different now. I'm not going to go back to how things were. But if you ever want to talk, really talk, I'm willing to listen. The conversation ended without any grand reconciliation, but it felt like a small step forward. Maybe, just maybe, Sarah was finally starting to understand the impact of her choices. Looking back on the past year, I realized how much I had changed. I was no longer defined by my role as the dependable brother. I had learned the importance of setting boundaries, of prioritizing my own well-being, and of recognizing my own worth. The betrayal had been painful, but it had ultimately led me to a place of greater self-awareness and empowerment. The life lesson I learned through all of this is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and even for others, is to step back, to stop enabling unhealthy patterns and to allow people to face the consequences of their own actions. It's not always easy, especially when it involves family, but sometimes walking away or at least setting firm boundaries is the bravest and most necessary choice you can make. It's about recognizing that you can't pour from an empty cup, and that taking care of yourself is not selfish, it's essential. If you've ever been in a similar situation, if you've ever felt taken advantage of or betrayed by someone you love, know that you're not alone. It takes courage to stand up for yourself and to make difficult choices. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories. And if you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe for more relatable and emotionally charged narratives.